eggs files. And we're going to start with a solution to the matrix, which has a little piece of a dragon and the egg story in it. This is the story of the Draco queens, the dragons, and the origins of our civilization. What we're here to talk about today has to do with the cultural fascination with films like The Matrix and The Cube and The Prisoner, where there's this unconscious knowing that there's something holding us in some kind of a membrane. We might even think of it as a little bit of an eggshell. And it turns out that this metaphor of the dragon's egg goes very deep into understanding some things about our cultural origins, and in the process holds some very important clues to the origins of our language. One of the places where our fun little story begins about how do we see through the matrix, how do we get out of the prisoner, how do we escape the cube, how do we escape incubation, actually starts a long, long time ago, when perhaps there's a way of understanding that we began collectively, genetically, as the planting here of a dragon's egg. For this, I'd like to return to a moment in history referred to by Zecharia Sitchin and talked about in the comparison of the current vision of how people see the Draco queens and the original Sumerian goddess statue. Right here, that's the Sumerian goddess statue, and that's a picture of the Draco as drawn at Montauk and at the firefight under Dulce. And we see that these apparent dragon queens are actually possibly what were called the Sumerian gods, which eventually became Inanna and Isis and maybe even Ninhursag. And so it is possible that literally there's something about their depositing here a dragon's egg that now needs to be penetrated with a kind of eye tooth for us to be collectively born, that's contained in the myth of this waiting for the pearl here. Something in our gene pool creates the pearl that the dragons are waiting for. Dragons sometimes, for some reason, as we may see, are not that good of mothers sometimes, and their eggs are a bit leathery, and breaking through the shell is a little tricky. So if we look back and reinterpret the Sumerian alphabet and story and tablets, as Zecharia Sitchin and Lawrence Gardner, in fact, have done, there is a rather strong implication that this group of what were called the fallen ones, or the Nephilim, came here for an explicit reason to, for some reason, do some genetic engineering on this planet. And it may turn out that the story of the dragon's egg is the right one. Because if we look closely at theirs and others' interpretation of the Sumerian, it seems like what they did when they got here, the Anunnaki, which may have some relationship to the families from Alpha Draconis, or Draco, which is the shape of an Arabic letter L, and it's even ironic that a major star in Draco is called Arrakis, which was the planet in Dune from which came the giant worms, or the dragon ones. But it appears that when the Anunnaki got here, one of the things they did to do the genetic engineering to make what apparently were gold mining slaves was they took the egg from the Anunnaki, the dragon queens, perhaps even Orion queens, if we believe that Thoth, son of Enki, came from Rigel in Orion, as we're told by this current Templar myth, that these Orion queens used Ninhursag's egg in which to plant the sperm of the Cro-Magnon man. And it was that experiment in crossing over, Hivri, as in Hebrew, means the crossing over of bloodlines. Uru means serpent or dragon. So you had the He-Buru, the Niburu, the Nibelung, being an experiment in the crossing over of bloodlines. And we were told rather clearly in the genetic engineering texts of Sumerian that Ninhursag's dragon's egg was, it's almost like they went to the place in the galaxy where there was this irritant, this little impurity which triggers what you deposit to make a pearl. And the irritant apparently had to do with the fact that these Anunnaki had lost the ability for some reason to get their DNA, we might say, ensouled, or able to travel in time, or able to have long-term memory, or able to carry memory through death. Or another way of putting it rather humorously is, after they lost the ability to squirt magnetism into compression inside DNA and through the speed of light into time, the only way they could travel in time was heavy metal craft, which was very embarrassing because everyone knows that if you travel in time using heavy metal, you're low end. So they were irritated because there was a threat to the immortality of their gene pool contained in this mythology of the fall, which I believe the word Nephilim means the fallen ones, as Sitchin has interpreted it. In fact, means specifically that the DNA stopped imploding. It stopped being braided to great spin density, which I believe has to do with what intense glandular emotion, passion, and bliss do by creating charge density to make DNA braid so that there's a wave inside a wave, superluminating. It's called superlooping inside the DNA, so you get this faster than light squirt gun up the slingshot zipper, up the slinky. And so here we have fallen DNA, an extended soul group family that for some reason lost track of their bliss and needed to deposit their dragon's egg to wait for the pearl. And now, if we're right that dragon's egg, Ninhursag's egg, Cro-Magnon's sperm, gave birth to basically Adam and Eve, Tak Adama, Tak Adam. Tak means Orion, Adam means Borg, from which came Adam and Eve, Borg from Orion. These were the gold mining donkeys they were using, and they used the gold not just, as Sitchin said, to repair the fabric of home atmosphere, but they were eating the gold powder. Gardner explains in great detail, after Moses became confused about whether he was talking to Enki or Enlil, that is Adonai, Enki, or Yahweh, Enlil, Moses was confused, and he was acting out this Orion issue about the loss of the trigger of implosion in the blood, this immortality Gilgamesh sought. And so Moses became a gold powder chef, the white powder, the manna, the ormes, the spice in Dune. And this is talked about in Gardner's book, Genesis of the Grail Kings. Here is Moses suddenly needing to cook up a substitute for bliss implosion in the DNA. And it's all about gold powder. So the point is that it wasn't just that they wanted the gold to repair the electrical fabric around the planet, which allows, by increased fractal recursion in the long wave magnetism of the planet, the stabilization of atmosphere. But in addition to that use for gold, they required the gold because they were eating it. And they were eating the gold because they needed a mechanical way to implode their DNA. Gold's valence structure creates implosion, the opposite of explosion, at the atomic level. And they needed this because they lost the gland juices. What was the form of the gland juices that they lost? And this is where we get this whole story of the astral milkhouse phenomena, this how you kind of milk a planet, which is classic among the dragon queens. They lost the ability to make their own glandular juices, so they need to eat other people